There are many power systems in JoJo, and I feel like Hamon is probably one of the ones that got underutilized the most. In a trilogy of videos, I will be talking about 3 of the biggest power systems in JoJo, being Hamon, Stan's, and the Spin. And starting in order, Hamon. Hamon made its debut in Part 1 Phantom Blood with William Zappelli, and made its final debut in Part 4 Diamond is Unbreakable. Hamon has the power to replicate the rays of the sun, and with that you have the ability to kill the undead in the JoJo universe. And to utilize it perfectly, you must have some type of Sendo training. It's a type of martial art learned in Tibet. We learn all of this in Part 1, thanks to William. The Hamon used in Part 1 was pretty basic in my opinion. I really thought it could have probably been used a lot more, but to be honest, Part 1 Phantom Blood is only 44 chapters long, so you really couldn't do much with it. But it was pretty cool seeing Jonathan beat Dio with Hamon and destroying his minions at the same time, so you know what? Good all around. But in Part 2, Araki kicks it up a notch, and we finally see Hamon get used in pretty unique ways, which I wanted to see in Part 1, but it totally works in Part 2. We see Caesar using, and I shit you not, bubbles with Hamon in them to actually do massive amounts of damage to the undead and the Pillarmen, which was honestly a great idea. Joseph kind of does some stuff with it too in unique ways, but it's nothing crazy like Caesar. And Lisa has a scarf sword, which is dope. Part 2 centers around this idea of unique fighting. That's what Araki was trying to go with Joseph. Joseph is not your traditional fighter. No one is in Part 2, to be totally honest, and that's pretty damn great with the use of Hamon. Hamon is not your traditional fighting style. It kills vampires. So how does Araki move forward with this power system in Part 3? Well, to explain that, Araki later on tells in an interview that he felt limited with Hamon, and I'll explain later why that's kind of dumb. Maybe Araki was not feeling himself that day, but yeah, Part 3 has barely any Hamon use, even though they're fighting Dio again, which is really weird. Joseph is the only one that uses Hamon in Part 3 and doesn't bother to teach it to anybody else in the group at that time, which is weird, even though, you know, Hamon has a very low person count since only very few amount of people can actually learn it, but half the people in that group were like super duper strong, and Jotaro was, you know, the grandson of Joseph, and Joseph got his Hamon powers from Jonathan, which is weird. And I don't know why Jotaro couldn't have not learned it, but Stan's kind of working to play with that. I'll explain it later in the Stan's video, but like, it's really stupid how Araki second guessed himself and jumped the gun, but Araki jumping the gun led to probably one of the best power systems in all of anime, so it worked out. And I will add, it doesn't get underutilized in Part 3. Hamon and Stan's get fused for a little bit in Part 3, thanks to Hermit Purple. And that's about it for Part 3. It gets like maybe 2 highlight moments in its own personal fight and against Dio, and then it's kind of just there giving directions to find Dio, so that's about it. So how is it used in Part 4? Well, it has less than 4 minutes of screen time. Araki really jumped the gun with this. Old Joseph uses Hermit Purple in Part 4 for like a fight and then like showing it off, and that's about it, because Josuke eventually kind of outshines his dad. So yeah. So what happened to Hamon? Well, like I previously said, Araki just felt limited with the powers of Hamon. And I'm going to be frank with you. Bullshit. Araki, you made bubble fighting. Araki, you made a backstory for the Pillar tribe that was connected with the Hamon tribe thousands of years ago in the JoJo universe. You could have said something like, you know, they had some ancient ass techniques, but you didn't. I hate this meme, and I really do, but I'm gonna pull the card. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna do it. I think Araki forgot about the backstory for Hamon. I'm gonna be honest. I think he did. Or second idea, Araki doesn't like Part 2 because, let's be honest, after Part 2, it doesn't get mentioned again. The Pillarmen don't get mentioned. Caesar doesn't get mentioned. Lisa doesn't get mentioned. It's only Part 1 and Dio that get mentioned after this point. Like, Part 3 only loves to mention Part 1. And after that, it's only Part 1. Part 5 is literally Part 1, referencing it. Giorno is literally the son of Jonathan and Dio. Like, I'm going to clarify this. I think Araki doesn't like Part 2, or he just forgot about stuff from Part 2 moving to Part 3. And I know Josuke is Joseph's son, so, you know, it clearly Araki was like, hey, you know, I like Joseph. I want to move along the plot. But, you know, Josuke literally is disconnected from his father and doesn't really see him as his dad. So, you know, it's not really referencing part 2 at all. It's more like, you know, there's a loose connection between, you know, young Joseph and Josuke, but there's nothing really there. I'm gonna be honest. Let's say Araki didn't forget, or he does like part 2. Let's say, in the best case scenario, he honestly and truly thought that Hamon could not go anywhere. And I'm gonna say, no. Tom Petty, back in part 1, apparently saw the visions of the future. It wasn't connected with Hamon and was barely explained, but as a writer, you could totally say, hey, that was because of Hamon. And then you could have just opened the floodgates to a whole bunch of, you know, mystical type stuff. Very similar to, you know, Doctor Strange from the MCU. Like, I know that's a crazy ass comparison, but let's be honest. Hamon was already weird to begin with. Doctor Strange's light whips are very similar to Lisa's Hamon scarf sword. They're about like 2 steps away from being, you know, kind of similar. And funny enough, both the organizations both take place in Tibet. So coincidence? I think not. I'm joking, of course, but you know, there's a lot of avenues you can go with Hamon. For crying out loud, apparently there's thousands of years of Hamon tribe history that Araki just said, hey, that exists. Moving on, you're telling me they don't have some funky, ancient, super powerful technique like in every other anime? And I know that's kind of generic to think about, but hell, it makes the power system better. Hell, to be totally honest, somebody in the comment section, as we speak, as I say these words currently right now in real time, somebody is writing a comment saying, hey, Araki could have totally done this in the series to make Hamon better. I'm going to agree with them and pin that comment. To be honest, anything really could have made Hamon better. You know, more weapons to make it a lot more effective, armor, a new style with how Hamon is used instead of Sendo, mixed martial arts, question mark? So many avenues, so many options to make this power system better, more fluid, a genuine improvement. But it gets stopped at part 2. I feel like as a community, as a reader, I was robbed of something that had a lot of potential. Now, this happens in a lot of series, I won't lie, but I feel like Hamon is probably the biggest example of this. Now, I'm going to clarify this before I get hate. Due to Araki thinking this, Araki made stands, which I totally and honestly do believe stands are better than Hamon, even with massive improvements. Except for the stands in part 6, those ones suck, except for Stone Free and Made in Heaven and Star Platinum. But other than that, stands are overall way better than Hamon. I will explain that in a few. Don't get me wrong, Araki really did sell himself short when making Hamon and second guessing himself, but let's be honest, 20 years later, and a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error, you can really make something really badass and unique, even if it's not something that you originally intended. Well, that's the end of the video. I think my analysis and rant over Araki's misguided ideas of his own writing are over. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated, see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.